The gymnasium on the third floor of the International Hotel in Los Angeles held exactly 214 people that afternoon in September of 1967. The ceiling was low. The fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency that made the air feel pressurized. The smell was liniment oil and old canvas and the particular kind of sweat that belongs to men who have trained every day of their adult lives without apology. Along the north wall, a row of folding chairs held the tournament observers, the credential holders, the men who had seen enough to know what they were looking at before the first technique was thrown. He sat in the fourth chair from the left end. He was wearing dark trousers and a plain white short-sleeved shirt. No badge, no rank insignia, no tournament lanyard around his neck. His shoes were leather-soled street shoes and they were flat on the floor. He sat with his hands resting open on his thighs and he was watching the center of the room the way a man watches a fire. Still, without comment. Nobody in that room knew who he was. That is the first fact worth holding. Now hold the second one. In 7 minutes and 14 seconds, a man who outweighed him by 83 pounds was going to walk to the center of that gymnasium and say something into a borrowed microphone that every person in that room would remember for the rest of their lives. And 5 seconds after that, the same man would be on the floor. 5 seconds. In front of 214 trained martial artists, officials and instructors from 11 different disciplines, a 265-pound bodybuilder and competitive fighter would issue the most public challenge and the most public insult of that autumn season in the Los Angeles martial arts world. And 5 seconds later, he would be out of breath on the gymnasium floor, staring at the ceiling. With no clear memory of how he had arrived there, nobody in that room knew they were about to witness a lesson that would travel through every dojo in Southern California by the following Thursday. Stay until the end of this story if you want to know the sentence Bruce Lee spoke before he walked away. His name was Raymond Carver, not the writer, the other one. Raymond Carver was 26 years old that September, and he had been training for 19 of those years in one form or another. He had begun with his father's weights in a garage in Pasadena when he was 7. By the time he was 16, he had placed in 3 regional bodybuilding exhibitions. By 20, he had accumulated a record in full contact competition that most men in his division could not match. 31 bouts, 29 wins, 2 draws, no recorded losses. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 265 pounds, and almost none of it was inventory. His striking power had been tested by 3 different coaches and found to be exceptional by the standards of the era. His kicking mechanics were limited by his mass, but his upper body speed was documented to exceed what his size suggested by a wide margin. He was not a fraud. That is essential to understand before the next part of this story can mean anything. Raymond Carver was a genuine physical specimen with a genuine competitive record and a genuine belief, arrived at through genuine experience, in the hierarchy of what his body could do to another man's body. He was also, by the testimony of every person in that room who spoke about this day afterward, absolutely certain of himself. Not confident. Certain, there is a difference, and the difference is fatal, and Raymond Carver had not yet learned it. He had come to the International Hotel that afternoon as an observer, the same as everyone else. He had been invited by a training partner who told him there would be demonstrations from several of the newer West Coast martial arts instructors. What he did not know, and what his training partner had not told him, was who else would be attending. What he did not know was the name of the man in the white shirt sitting 4 chairs from the left end of the north wall. He watched the first 2 demonstrations without expression. He was polite in the way that very large men can afford to be polite in rooms where no one has yet required them to be otherwise. Then the 3rd demonstrator finished. The tournament director, a man named Harold Fitch, who had been running martial arts events in the Los Angeles basin for 11 years, stood and said that he wanted to open the floor for a moment before the next presentation. Harold Fitch was 51 years old, and he had seen a great many things in 11 years of running these gatherings. He would say, later, that he saw what was coming before Raymond Carver stood up. He would say that the quality of attention in the room shifted before the large man even rose from his chair. The way pressure shifts before weather. Raymond Carver stood. He was not given the microphone. He took it. He walked to the center of the floor and he turned to face the room and he looked at the assembled instructors and officials and observers and he said the following, in a voice that carried to every corner of that low-ceiling gymnasium without effort. He said that he had been watching demonstrations for 2 hours. He said that he had found them, most of them, to be interesting in a theatrical sense. He said that he had a great deal of respect for tradition and for training. And then he said something else. He said that he had read about a certain Chinese instructor who had been making a reputation in this city by claiming that his system could defeat men of any size and any record. He said that he had personally seen this claim repeated in print, and that he found it to be, in his word, embarrassing. He said that claims of that kind did a disservice to serious practitioners everywhere. He said that if the man he was referring to was present in this room, he would like to invite him to the center of the floor and find out together what his system actually amounted to. Then he paused, and he said the name. He said, Bruce Lee. He said it the way a man says a name he believes belongs to a story that is smaller than it is. The room did not erupt. It did not murmur. It did a specific thing that rooms do when the air pressure changes all at once. It went quiet in a way that had texture to it. Harold Fitch would describe it, in a telephone conversation with a colleague in San Francisco 3 days later, as the silence of a room that has already decided something. He said it was the silence of 213 people who knew the answer to a question that one person did not. 213 people, because the man in the white shirt was no longer sitting in his chair. If you want to know what happened next, and if this story is the kind you have been looking for, take 10 seconds right now and subscribe to this channel. Thousands of people have watched this moment told badly, in fragments, from sources that got the details wrong. We tell it the way it happened. Subscribe and comment below what city you are watching from. People have answered that question from 43 countries. He rose without hurry. He did not stand the way a man stands when he is surprised. He stood the way a man stands when a thing he has been half expecting has finally presented itself at a reasonable hour. He reached up and removed his jacket. He folded it once along the center seam. He set it on the seat of the chair with the fold facing up. He did not look at Raymond Carver while he did this. He looked at the jacket. Then he walked to the center of the floor. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He weighed, on that day, by the account of a trainer who had seen him the previous week, 138 pounds. He was wearing street shoes with leather soles that were not designed for lateral movement on a gymnasium floor. He was 26 years old, the same age as Raymond Carver, though he looked younger under the fluorescent lights and smaller by a distance that the room seemed to be measuring in real time. The recognition did not happen all at once. It moved through the room the way tide moves through a harbor, one section filling before the next one knows. The observers near the south window understood first. Then the row behind Harold Fitch. Then the back wall. By the time Bruce Lee had reached the center of the floor and stopped, the wave of recognition had traveled to every chair and every standing position in that gymnasium. 213 people who knew what they were looking at, and one who did not. He has already lost. He simply has not been informed yet. Raymond Carver looked at the man who had walked out to meet him. He looked at the street shoes and the white shirt and the 138 pounds and the height that fell 7 inches short of his own. He did not hide what he was thinking. His face did the work of a man making a calculation he already knows the answer to. He said something quietly. Only 2 or 3 people in the front row heard the exact words. What they agreed on later was the tone. The tone was the same as his tone at the microphone. Certain, Bruce Lee did not respond to the tone. He looked at the distance between them and made one small adjustment to his weight, and then he said 2 words. He said, "Show me." A fight is not a collision between 2 bodies. That is a common misunderstanding, and it is the misunderstanding that Raymond Carver carried with him to the center of that gymnasium floor. A fight is a negotiation about distance. The man who controls the distance controls the terms of the agreement. The man who does not control the distance does not control what happens to him, regardless of what he weighs or what his record says. Raymond Carver had 127 pounds of advantage standing in front of him. He had reach, mass, a tested striking record, and the absolute certainty of a man who has never been hurt by someone his target's size. He had every number in the room. Numbers are the last thing a fight is about, the first second. Carver moved first. The commitment was total, which is the only kind of commitment a man his size can afford and the only kind that reveals everything. He threw a right hand that, by the estimate of a judo instructor named David Kwan, who was standing 6 feet from the action with an unobstructed view, would have ended the conversation immediately if it had arrived at its destination. It did not arrive at its destination. Bruce Lee was no longer where the right hand was going. He had moved 4 inches to the left and slightly forward, which is the direction no one moves toward a man that size, and the right hand passed through air that smelled like liniment oil and found nothing. David Kwan set down his coffee cup. He would not pick it up again for 11 minutes. The second, the momentum of Carver's missed right hand turned him a fractional degree to his left. It was not visible from the chairs on the north wall. It was visible to the man who had caused it. Bruce Lee moved once more, and the movement was not a retreat. It was an arrival. He arrived at a position directly to Carver's right side, inside the arc of any effective follow-up, at a distance that a 265-pound man has no leverage at and a 138-pound man has every advantage at. Carver felt the proximity before he processed it. His left arm came across as a response, a wide clearing movement designed to restore the distance he needed. It found nothing. Harold Fitch had both hands flat on the table in front of him. He had not decided to put them there. They arrived there by themselves. The third second. Carver reset. He was a trained man, and a trained man does not lose his structure after 2 misses. He recovered his base and brought his guard back and looked at the man in the white shirt with the street shoes and recalculated. The recalculation showed him nothing useful. Bruce Lee was standing at an angle that did not correspond to any attacking angle Carver had trained to receive. It was not a martial arts stance in any of the 11 systems represented in that gymnasium. It was its own thing. Carver had spent 19 years preparing for what other trained men would do. He had not prepared for this. A stunt coordinator named Philip Eng, who had worked on 3 pictures and had seen fast men work on sets, would say that the first 3 seconds looked to him like watching a man try to grab his own shadow on a wall. He said this to 4 different people over the following 2 weeks, and each of them used the same word when they heard it. They said, exactly. The 4th second. The strike came from an angle that the witnesses disagreed about afterward, in the specific way that witnesses always disagree about things that happen faster than the eye builds a complete record. What they agreed on was the target and the result. The target was the large muscle group below Carver's left ribs, the oblique, a location that holds no drama but contains the nerve cluster that governs the diaphragm's willingness to cooperate. The strike was short. It was not large. It did not look like what people in that room expected a finishing technique to look like, which is why 2 of the 14 witnesses who described it later said they almost missed it. It did not miss. Nothing about it missed. The 5th second. Raymond Carver's legs continued to hold him for 1 more unit of time after the contact. Then they made a decision. He went down the way a structure goes down when the load-bearing element has been compromised rather than destroyed. Controlled complete, he sat on the gymnasium floor and he put 1 hand down to steady himself, and he tried to draw a breath and found that the instrument responsible for breath was temporarily unavailable for comment. He was out of breath. He had been out of breath before. In training, after hard rounds, at the far end of long sets. He knew the feeling. The difference between those times and this time was the time. This time it had taken 5 seconds. He was looking at the ceiling of the gymnasium. The fluorescent lights hummed above him. He was 265 pounds and he had a record of 31 bouts and 29 wins, and he was sitting on the floor of the International Hotel Gymnasium in Los Angeles in September of 1967. And the man who had put him there weighed 138 pounds and was wearing street shoes with leather soles. The room did not make a sound. Bruce Lee stood over him. Not above him, in the sense of victory or theater. Beside him, at a specific angle that communicated nothing aggressive and nothing condescending. He extended his right hand downward, not as a gesture, as an offer. He did not speak immediately. He gave Raymond Carver the time he needed. He gave him the time to take the breath that arrived, finally with the reluctance of something returning from a trip it had not planned. He gave him the time to look at the hand and understand what it was. And then he leaned down slightly, and he said something. He said it quietly enough that no one else in the room heard the words. Only Raymond Carver heard the words. He held the hand out until Raymond Carver took it. He helped him to his feet. He held the grip for a moment after Carver was standing, the way you hold a grip when you are making certain the man is stable and not just upright. Then he released it. He turned, walked back to the north wall, picked up his jacket from the chair where he had left it, and walked toward the door. Philip Eng reached out and placed a hand briefly on his shoulder as he passed. Just for a moment. A single touch, confirming something. Raymond Carver stood in the center of the floor. He was breathing normally now. He looked at the room, and the room looked at him, and everyone present understood that the next thing he said was going to define something. He stood at the fork. One road went toward the thing you say when a man 4 inches shorter and 127 pounds lighter than you has sat you on the floor in 5 seconds in front of 213 witnesses. When you have said the things you said into the borrowed microphone. When your certainty has been converted in real time into evidence of a different kind. That road requires something of a man. It requires him to be larger than the story he walked in with. The other road is always available. The other road offers a shoulder, a floor that was slippery, a technique that only works under laboratory conditions, a body that had not been fully prepared that particular afternoon. Raymond Carver looked at the room for a long time. Then he said, in a voice that was not quiet but was not performing volume either, that he owed an apology to this room and to the man who just left it, and that he intended to find out who that man actually was, and that he intended to begin again from a more honest position than the one he had arrived with. He chose the first road. He chose it in front of 213 people, and not one of them forgot it. The story moved the way stories like this move, which is faster than any intentional communication system and with a fidelity that is, ironically, higher than the speed would suggest. By the following morning, the training partner who had brought Raymond Carver to the International Hotel had told it to 4 people. By Wednesday, it had reached 3 dojos in the San Fernando Valley and 1 in Long Beach. By Thursday, the version circulating in Chinatown had some of the details wrong. The way circulating stories always do, the crowd had grown to 400 in some tellings. The strike had changed location in others, the time had extended in a few versions because 5 seconds sounded too short to people who had not been in the room. But the core of it held. The core of it held because 213 people had seen it, and because the core was simple enough that it could not be misremembered without obviously becoming something else. Harold Fitch spoke about it in a keynote address at a tournament in Anaheim the following spring. He said he had been running martial arts events for 11 years and that he had seen exceptional performances and remarkable athletes and genuinely surprising outcomes, and that he had never before experienced the specific quality of silence that filled the International Hotel gymnasium in the moment between the strike and Raymond Carver finding the floor. He said it was the silence of a room that had been handed evidence it had not expected in the form it arrived. David Kwan wrote about it in a letter to a colleague in Japan. The letter is in an archive. The colleague he sent it to was also a practitioner of some standing, and the letter passed through 3 more pairs of hands before the year was out. And at each pair of hands it accumulated the kind of credibility that first-hand observation carries when the observer is known. Philip Anin told it on sets for 20 years. He told it to actors and directors and stuntmen and crew, and the version he told never changed in its essential measurements, because Anin had been 6 feet from the action and had seen it completely. And he had the particular kind of memory that men develop when they understand that they are watching something they will be asked about for the rest of their lives. Raymond Carver did not tell it for a long time. He went back to Pasadena. He went back to his training. He found out who the man in the white shirt was, which did not take long once he started asking. He made a decision about how to proceed from the honest position he had said he intended to proceed from. By the mid-1970s, he had become a credible and respected instructor in his own right, and the students he taught longest said that the first thing he told every new class was a sentence that had the weight of something arrived at through experience rather than philosophy. He told them that the most dangerous thing a fighter could carry into a fight was the story he had decided about himself before it began. He never publicly identified the man who put him on the floor. He did not need to. The story had traveled further than his identification could have carried it. As for the private sentence, the words Bruce Lee spoke when he leaned down and no one else could hear them, Raymond Carver did not repeat them for 14 years. When he finally did, in a conversation with a student he had been training for a decade and who had asked him directly on a night when the question landed differently than it had before, he said that what Bruce Lee had said to him was not about the fight. He said it was not about what Carver had said at the microphone, or who had been wrong, or who had been right. He said that what Bruce Lee said, in the specific quiet that belonged to the two of them in the center of that gymnasium floor, was simply, "Now you know where to start." He said that sentence had been worth every second of the 5. A very large man in a borrowed gymnasium told 200 people that he knew the measure of a thing he had never encountered. He was not dishonest. He was uninformed. The difference between dishonesty and being uninformed is the difference between a man who will not learn and a man who has not yet had the right teacher arrive at the right moment. Raymond Carver was uninformed. And then, in 5 seconds, he was not. Certainty is not a credential. It is a hypothesis. The only examination it can pass or fail is the one that happens when the floor is available and the witnesses are present and the man across from you has no interest in your previous record. What a man knows about himself and what a man can demonstrate about himself are two separate inventories. Keep them honest with each other, or be prepared for the room to do it for you. Next week, we will tell the story of what happened in a parking structure in Burbank in 1971 when a former military contractor decided that a film set was the right place to settle a question about who the most dangerous man on the production was. That story involves Bruce Lee, one concrete pillar, 4 witnesses who gave sworn statements they later declined to repeat, and a 12-word sentence that a grip named Terrence Walsh repeated at his own retirement party 31 years later. Subscribe if you want to be there when we tell it. Comment below where you are watching from tonight.